Hello, welcome to the Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. Welcome to Stream Street Day 95. That's right, 95 days in a row. Ain't
Oh,
no stopping us now. I'm on the
you're on
move.
the roof.
I'm on the move. Is it on the roof, not on the move?
I'm on the roof.
Shut
I
up.
thought. Yeah.
I've been singing that song for years.
Let me
I'm
just.
on the... No. Uh, that's a big number. That is a big number, but tomorrow's number will be bigger than today's number, and it's more bigly than yesterday's number. So therefore, it's the bigliest of all numbers you've ever seen. The move is on fire. All right, thanks, Stal, for singing. Andrew Tate, good morning. Hook and Pin, K-Dread, Wargaming Dad. Thank you, everyone, for joining us live. If you are listening to the podcast, please stay hydrated. I'd like you to know something, John.
Yeah.
In the UK, in the UK, The Honest Wargamer is now the 134th most popular podcast in leisure.
Leisure. Oh, so we're very leisurely.
Apparently, we're very leisurely.
Nice.
But,
Sweet. I'm in.
And I mean, that's only the UK, and it is 134th. So I'm not really, I'm kind of proud because whoever number 135 is a chump. Yeah,
I'm
screw
gonna get
those
my
guys.
mum to follow it, and then suddenly we'll go up a few again. It'd be great.
Yeah, so if anyone who's listening to us live or watching us back, or is going to listen to the podcast, share it with your mates. Just get them downloading. Just it'd be cool if they also listened. I'm just going to say that. But eventually, I'd like to be maybe the 97th podcast in leisure. I don't want to set my goal too high, but I do want to be, I do want to go all... What do you think, John?
I'd like it to be just 2 digits. That'd be cool, right? Because
Yeah,
I can't count any higher than that.
Yes, I do. And I'd kind of like it. I don't know if anyone in the UK knows, not UK, anyone of our audience members who's not from the UK and isn't working class knows much about bingo culture. But what bingo is where there's a group of balls that roll around in a kind of container. You drag one out and you say it's a number. Now, one of those numbers is, and they have funny names like Legs 11. One of those is really funny, which is number 88. And it's not meant to insult anyone, so please don't be upset by it if you are. But it's Two Fat Ladies 88. That's what they say, those bingo callers. And I tell you what, I'd like to be the Two Fat Ladies podcast, because I feel like over time, sitting down during the lockdown, John, I'm becoming one of them fat ladies. How do you feel about that?
Unfortunately, there is already a Two Fat Ladies program.
Is there?
There was 2 older ladies that cooked a lot on the BBC, I think it was, and it was
Shut up.
so homely.
Oh my God! Wow, now I'm just learning things all the time. Wow. Okay. So welcome to the show.
But yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, welcome to the show. I'm joined by Mr. John Scrivens. This way. Oh no, I've threw my paintbrush. This way, as you can see, there he is, and he
This way.
that way. And this just over here. And today we are going to be talking about a bunch of things. I said before the show I was meant to be at an online tournament today with Mr. Owen Jackson, but some personal things came up, so I wasn't able to attend, which is quite sad. So I'm a bit grumpy about that, especially as I'm going to run all my cow guy. It doesn't matter. I didn't do it, so it doesn't matter.
Don't have a cow man.
Yeah. But today's show, we are going to be, I'm going to do some painting, we're going to be talking to John, but one of the things that I'd be interested in talking about is, of course, talking about scenery. This is what I'm going to be talking about. Now, not the rules of scenery, but creating boards. I watched an amazing video from Mr. Vince Ventrella on Wednesday about display boards, but that isn't really what I mean. I'm more talking boards,
So
actual...
like a themed board that's got practical use, but also looks cool, right?
But it's also got a story, yeah. Practical, looks great, story. The triumvirate. Good rules or good rules interactions, good narrative, good and good looking. Good looking. It's like you, John. Good looking with a good narrative.
All these lines tell a story, Rob.
So, but before I do that, well, before we do talk about that, we could take some questions. I was going to ask you, John, how you are, but I'll take a question any questions that you'd like real quick. Andrew Tate says, a bit off topic, but the £110 Lumineth box, is it worth it? I'm incredibly tempted to add it to my own Idoneth. Now, it depends how much you how much you care about the book, because I would say a lot of that £110 that you're paying for
It's the book.
is the book, and then you're getting the dice, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. But really, it's a character model,
So
Yeah,
20 quid, 25 quid at a push.
yeah. A box of cavalry, 30, 35 quid, and a box of. You don't even get the bowman. I thought you got the bowman in it, but you don't. So
No,
a
it's just
box of
spears.
spearmen.
Yeah,
It's a box of spearmen. So you
which
don't
is
get,
35 again.
which is again £35. So like 70, 90. So it's about 90 quid if you were to buy the stuff separately, and obviously that's at full price maybe. So if
And then
you
if you
were,
take into account the books, a special books, they basically sell them for 50 normally, which is pretty bonkers anyway.
yes, yeah,
But if
it's
you take that
just
into account, that's what they'd model it on, right?
especially as there's day one FAQs.
I love
so,
it.
so that always makes it more of an issue. So I mean, it really depends on. I think you can get it from a third party retailer for like 91 quid, right? If it's not already sold out.
88, I think I've seen it go for.
I mean, 88 seems fairly reasonable,
All
but
right.
to me, go on.
It's all right, isn't it? It's the start of an army, right? It's a way of you buying it and then going, I can get this stuff done, like I did with my sisters, which I didn't.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. I don't know. Like for me, I'm not particularly interested because if I'm buying an army, I normally have written the list before I buy the army. I used to way back in the day. I just used to buy everything, which is how
Yeah.
I've ended up with so much. I'd just be like, cool, I'm getting this army. Eventually I'm gonna want 10 knights. I'm gonna want 30 of this unit. I'm gonna want 30 of that unit. So I'd buy it like that, if that makes sense. But as time has
And if
gone
it looked
on,
cool, you'd buy like the maximum you could use of that unit because you think it looks cool as well, right?
yeah. But now as time has gone on, I've just gone, cool, I'm only gonna get X number of this, right? Um, I'm only gonna get so many of these. So that's like I was looking at some orc mega knobs the other day, and I was like, actually, I want some, but I don't know how viable they're going to be in the new edition. So I'm obviously going to hold fire, and yeah, so I'm just going to hold fire and wait. And then even then, I won't buy I'll buy the number I would want for a squad, maybe with a box extra. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I know people are very excited about the box set, the Lumineth. I mean, the rules are really strong. They've got some really fun rules as well. But they announced last night, John, that you won't be able to get Lumineth
Yeah.
or the next wave of Lumineth. So it's the starter box, and then you have to wait over a month. So September, so maybe even longer. It won't be more than a month, actually, isn't it? A couple of months, so you have to wait till late September. Ba, 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 da, 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 da. Let's just do Disco Saturday. I'm in. Yeah.
At least when you DJ, I can't hear you singing.
That's true. That's what I'm missing, I think, actually. I used to do DJ. I used to DJ disco night. It was amazing. Hello to Lee Bromley, Trog, MJ Pegasus. He says £110 is almost all of my budget right now. If I wait a month, that budget is almost tripled, and I can be more selective. Yeah, I think you should hold off, especially with 40k. Like, if you're interested in 40k, you're going to want the 40k rulebook. We don't know when GHB is going to be. If you're an Age of Sigmar only guy, that's pretty soon. And at the end of the day, it's a nice box, but it's not, like we've talked about, it's not an overly efficient box. The other thing we probably should talk about is I bought all of the special edition. Let's do this conversation, John. This wasn't what I was expecting. But I bought all of the limited edition End Times books. Yeah?
Yeah.
No, they look great. They look
they
great.
are lovely. They're a lovely thing to have, right?
Yeah, there's some of the better books that Games Workshop has ever made. Like, the art inside was beautiful. I still look at them sometimes. They're not Monstrous Arcanum nor Tamra Khan, but they're still great books. But they were fucking tons of money, now I think about it, back in the day. Yeah? And now they, like rules-wise and even narratively-wise, they're useless. Now, I don't expect that to be true for the Lumineth, and not for several years. Well, I at least expect. But, how do you feel about limited edition books, especially when we know Games Workshop has a problem with quality control, so those books normally need, like, pages putting in them, or rules erratas, or whatever it would be. And then later on, we're seeing the speed of those books change. Like, if you bought a limited edition Space Marines book 2 years ago and you bought another one last year, I'm like, wait, I mean, maybe that you've got the money to spend.
Got one coming next month, mate.
Yeah. So what do you think about limited edition books? Everyone in the chat, and you, John. What do you think?
I think they're nice, but I've always avoided them generally as a kind of rule of thumb because essentially you're paying double for quite often just a cover change. And to me, I was like, it can be as nice as you want, that cover, but it's not really worth it. And then you're scared to use that book, so then what's the point?
Yeah.
So like my
Yeah.
sister's book, I got it because I wanted the figures, and I do kind of half regret it. But that's more that it was that whole I don't want to miss out, and I think that's what these boxes are more for, right? It's the fear of missing out. Like
Yes,
people want to
very much.
jump on the bandwagon, and the hype is there. Like, oh, the new stuff everyone's waiting for. I want to join the bandwagon, which is,
The bandwagon isn't fair. I don't
but you know
think
what I mean.
it's
It's like
fair.
it's the excitement, and everyone gets kind of caught up in it, and then they want to go and they want to be doing it with their mates as well. Like, going, look, I've done this scheme, and then their mate goes, oh, I've done this scheme, and it's all
Yeah,
nice, and it's
I don't like.
enthusiasm, kind of infectious, right?
Yeah, no, I get you, and I know that you weren't trying to be negative because you're not. You're
No, no,
always a positive guy. I don't know. I think the idea of bandwagon, like obviously, if we were talking about some trainers or some Supreme clothes, we'd be hype beasts, right? Like check out these
yeah,
hype beasts. They're like well on it, and
yeah.
you wouldn't be seen as a negative. You'd be really into that culture,
Yes,
and that's what we are, I guess. For me, especially as time goes on, especially I love Warhammer for the physicality of the models, and that's
yes.
never going to change. But as time has gone on, and like in my personal life, I've bought very few physical books in a very long time. I've bought some, other than Warhammer. I mean, I've bought some, but
Yeah.
almost all of them now are digital. It saves room in my house. It's easy to transport. I have it forever. It can't get damaged. I mean, the tablet that I'm reading on could get damaged, but it's saved into my account for all of
It's in
time.
the cloud, right? So it's not like if you lose it, it's not gone.
Yeah, like, I mean, there are other problems as well. You can't sell it, you can't lend it, but, and digital property rights is a whole conversation. Like, if I die, can I give my property rights down to my children, sort of thing? Not that I have any that I know about. Anyway, so yeah, limited edition books are less and less to me unless they released a Chaos Dwarf book, and then I mean, like if they did a limited edition Chaos Dwarf book, oh my god, I'd be all over that. I'd be
I
all
would struggle with that. I'd struggle with that even.
what getting it or not getting it.
I'd, I'd kind of be tempted if it was the only route to get it as well. I think that's often the thing. It's like at the moment these box sets with the book is the only way to get the book. And if you're someone that's quite into still having a physical book to read, you might want to grab it as a result. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Let me see what everyone else in the chat is saying. If you're okay with that, John.
Yeah, because they're
Let's
probably
see.
saying more insightful things than
I
I.
don't think that's true. I just finished my first round of the Owen Jackson tournament, says Colonel Cabbage, and a victory for the three magma droths. Let's not talk about it. I'm a bit jealous. Echo Scorpion, sorry. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you being here. Proposition Joe, do we know if the embargo has been lifted on GMG or whichever will preview the Lumineth book? That we actually did an entire preview on it yesterday, Proposition Joe, which I felt was a pretty comprehensive review of the book.
Yeah, it was really
But
good. I watched it last night actually.
yes, we just didn't show every rule on the screen as a page. We actually analysed the book. Isn't that reviewing the book?
I think so. I think just flicking through pages to me doesn't give me any inspiration on the book. I could do that myself a week later, but I don't know. It serves a purpose, but not necessarily a practical and positive one for me personally.
Yeah, yeah. Way too pricey. That okay in boxes though, says Virulent, talking about I mean the start, that's not the problem. I love the start collecting series that Games Workshop does. I think it's brilliant. I think it's really clever. I would prefer if there was some more thought put into what was in the start collecting box as it pertains to army building. But I do understand that some of those start collecting boxes have gone over editions now, so like they're not particularly clear and there's not a lot of clarity on what is good. Also, they don't really understand what's good. Otherwise, they would point things better, right? You know,
Because to me, a very good example of that is the Orc 40k one. You get a Pain Boy, one troop choice, and then a heavy support unit. It's not really the start of an army
no.
in the definitive way. It'd be nice if it was a leader, sort of someone you'd want to use as your HQ kind of general, with a couple of units, perhaps. Even if it was just a bit more vanilla, I think you'd get a better grounding, perhaps, that way.
Yes, but you understand selling you an incomplete army means you then have to spend more money to buy the rest of the complete army. So it's not really a start collecting. It's a start collecting. It's not a start playing, which I think a start playing box would be
Be
way
better, I think.
Ah,
Yeah, totally.
Maybe that's something we could invent. A start playing guide. Nice.
Which units do you need to start off in a most efficient way that you're not burdening yourself financially as well, perhaps.
That's hard though. That's hard. That's a challenge.
It's very subjective as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. Like looking at the Lumineth as an example, having read the rules and having ingested it and taken a couple of days to like consider them. Well, a day and a half to consider it. I've thought actually I'd quite like a lot of spearmen. I'd like at least 60 spearmen. And if I don't do the spearmen, which is a lot of painting, I'd probably go elite mountain goats and tech lists, and then a couple of minimum troops. Yeah, which is again like it's not a particularly strong. So like if someone was like, well, start collecting or start playing from me, I'd be like, well, actually, there's these two builds that you could go along, which I think are quite fun and interesting, but problematically, like it just means buying reams of boxes. Do you know what I mean? Like there's no clever way to go about that. And so, at which point the honest-wargamer website does the same job. Anyway,
that kind of to me is a positive though, because you look at it and go, these are two cool lists, but one will cost you stupid amounts of money, and that then becomes a consideration. Even if it's not a better list, the one that's financially less of a burden may be things that people lean into more. Like if you're playing orcs and you want to have 100% Games Workshop plastic models, you might not want to spend 300 quid on mech guns because that's only 500 points of your army type of thing. It's a practicality, right?
Yeah, who does? Well, Lee Bromley says, and also hi Lee, I think it depends if you're a narrative gamer or if you're a narrative or a gamer. So, great question, great point, Lee. Let me finish Lee's point, and I'm going to push back on something that has come up over the past 2 weeks, and something that I'm going to put a pin in for now. I think it depends if you're a narrative or a gamer. I love a sexy looking book if I'm going to read every page, not just skip to the back and look for rules and never read the stories. So I always read all the stories, but the stories come out after the rules. And there are already podcasters and also YouTubers who already like break down the narrative and put that out as podcasts or as YouTube videos, right? And it's also something I'm not overly interested in doing. All I'm really doing is regurgitating someone else's story. Like, whereas the analysis of reading through the rules is something I get excited about and I like talking about. But my point is, also, hey Korg, big love to you. Russ, what up? John, all gamers are narrative gamers.
Yes, I think it's like anything. You're a varied kind of on a scale of how narrative you want to be. Like, I think a lot of people can be a competitive gamer with a strong narrative leaning, but you can also have narrative gamers that are competitive as well. And it's not as simple as just saying you're one or the other, right?
All right. So
you're a very big competitive gamer, but you're also very narratively led, right?
Because we're in a small group, I'm going to pitch an idea to you. Yeah. And because changing how we discuss things is always like been a part of this show.
Yes.
Narrative gamers are just crap gamers, is my statement. Hold on. Let me clarify. Because no, fuck you. Listen to my point.
No,
yeah, listen to my point.
Yeah,
I play a game competitively well. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying I do. I'm not saying in fact I do.
It's your goal.
Yeah. Let's say my goal is right.
Yeah.
But and this is important. I always play with a strong narrative in mind. If I'm playing Sylvaneth, not because I don't. It's not something I have to be conscious of. My army is that. I've read the narrative. I know the story. I put up a set of Sylvaneth Wildwoods, that's narrative, because I'm Sylvaneth. I have some Kurnoth Hunters, that's narrative, They go beat some stuff up, that's narrative. None of that is not a narrative element,
Yes.
Let's say, so I don't understand, this is the thing that's bugged me for a while, actually. Someone's like, well, you're not playing that army narratively. I'm like, I don't understand what that means, because what am I doing wrong? What could I possibly be doing? I know the story, I'm playing the army how it plays and how it plays in the book, Khorne goes beat stuff up, It likes it when units die and I use my blood tithe. My Kharadron overlords are in boats and they drop down and they shoot stuff. My flesh eater courts think that they're knights and they're charging in and they're heroic, Like, all of it plays narratively, right?
Yes.
The only people who don't play, like the people who play, I'm going to do it in bunny ears, narratively, are just because, I can't really be asked to learn how to play better. Otherwise, if you're playing utterly narratively, you're not playing within the bounds of the rules. in which case you are a narrative gamer with distinction. Yeah, you're a narrative gamer who does like you can't be a narrative gamer inside the framework of I play in match play, but I play narratively, so I break the rules sometimes. You can't play inside that framework. What you have to be is a narrative gamer who plays outside of the contention of the framework of the rules. Yeah, right. You have to be.
I don't disagree with your statement about essentially the way that you approach playing the game, but a classic example, a guy that comes to my club called Gareth, he considers himself a narrative gamer. He will go to tournaments, he'll bring a list that is suboptimal, but is it's still narrative like the competitive list would be. But I think that's the distinction, is he wants to use the units that don't get love without the motivation to do well.
Again, being an efficient gamer, in no way reduces the impact of being a narrative gamer.
Yeah, exactly.
As an example,
that's the distinction, I think, really between the two. Let's talk about Daughters of Cain, right? Yeah. Now, Daughters of Cain, traditionally, the bow snake ladies weren't particularly strong. Yeah, they weren't an efficient choice, right? But I could put them in my list, which I know is a poor efficiency choice, and I have no justification of saying, well, actually, I'm more narrative. I'm like, no, because that would mean that if I take Sisters of Slaughter, somehow that's less narrative than taking these, which I think that's fair. Yeah,
which doesn't work. That makes no sense, right?
Correct.
So, like, you know, as much as it pisses me off consistently seeing eels, so because I see Diogenes brought that up the point, it's narrative. Like, and they get better in the sub-faction, which is the competitive choice, but the narrative choice. I will bang on all day about how talented Games Workshop were for doing that. They traditionally had this conversation about power and narrative, and they were at war with each other, right? I remember 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle seeing Nurgle, Chaos Warriors with Sineshi Demon Princes. I was just like, this is in one army. I'm like, oh, I hate this. This is awful, right? Because this doesn't seem to make sense narratively. But now it's a whole Sinesh army. It all makes sense narratively. But just because you
just
don't
touched upon something there, actually.
What?
It's two very different, distinct problems across the two game systems. In Age of Sigmar, I don't think it's as much of a problem, but there's the throwback that people have about it. Whilst in 40k, there's still that problem, because you get people bringing two Chaos Gods that hate each other in a list, or you get a Company Commander Guard guy leading Custodes when he wouldn't. From the hierarchy's not there. So you still have that 8th edition fantasy problem in 40k currently. But you don't in Age of Sigmar, perhaps.
Right, well, let's look at some criticisms of the point, because the point isn't meant to be factual. Yeah.
It's a discussion point at the end of the day.
It's a discussion point, right? That was the topic, and I
it got me thinking, which was nice. It got me uncomfortable and thinking about my opinion of it, which is what we should be doing, right?
Oh well,
we just agree
we don't have to. Some people just want to like tell some dick jokes, man. Like, just have a great time. I've got a great one for Monday. Like when I talk about when I got the Lumineth list that I've written for Nathan, I'm going to call it the Nathan Prescott build, and they'll be like, oh, how come? They were like, I don't want it to be called that. Why is it called that? I'll be like, because it's just got two giant balls. It's just going to dick people, Nathan Prescott build.
It's got the bill tongue to it.
I'm waiting. Yeah, nice. Yeah, I'm going to add that in. Thanks. Anyway, let's talk about some criticisms at this point. Can't be arsed might be a bit strong, says Pete Pratt. Have no desire is maybe a bit better. Pete, you hit the nail on the head. I think you're absolutely right. It's also a hobby, right? I talked about this a little bit on the 40k show. I talked about this before. It takes an incredible amount of work to actually start to develop some competency and some skill playing Warhammer. Yeah. However, painting up the toys that you love, turning up and kind of half reading through a rule book as you roll some dice and drink some beer requires no skill, and it shouldn't. And if that's what you want to do with your time, I respect it, I love it, and I'm with you. I'll defend you wanting to do that forever. Like, I'm on side. Yeah. Whereas that just because you don't have no desire to, you should have no criticism. Like, I hate the Olympics, John. I'm gonna tell you, I hate the Olympics. I've talked about it. I don't know if I've talked about this on the show before. I can't, because I don't see it as really being something to applaud. Like, a guy
I'm
can
good
run
at throwing a frisbee.
Well, yeah, that's me. right? But I do because I think there should be more awards for like mental acuity and like people like developing things, but whatever. But that is irregardless of the fact, and this is having, by the way, come from someone who professionally has competed at a sport. At an international level, I used to do Filipino stick fighting at an international level for a couple of years. But the Olympians, which were way more serious than I, have put loads of work, time, dedication, and skill in. Yeah, right. So while I think I wouldn't watch the Olympics, I think that they're a bit like I just don't see the point of them. I completely understand their skill. I completely understand their effort, and I completely understand their dedication required to do it. Does that make sense? Yeah? And I feel like I'm a narrative gamer I'm a narrative runner.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. I'm a
I touch
narrative
on
runner.
what
Usain
Wagner
Bolt is a
said?
bit of a power runner.
Yeah.
Yeah? And I'm a narrative runner, which is out of breath up a flight of stairs. I'd just like you to clarify that.
Yeah. So I want to touch on what Wagdad said. I actually quite disagree with him. He said that if you use a match play points, you can't call it narrative play when it comes to a competitive game. To me, narrative can be the framework that decides what you're playing. Doesn't necessarily mean that's how you're playing. So the problem Games Workshop have had recently to me is they go, you've got all these different ways to play, but realistically, if I'm playing a narrative game with a mate down the club where there's not the pressure that I don't necessarily want to win just by beating the crap out of him and it being this mess, but we will start with the framework of match play because that's the game. To us, the only way we play is match play points, because if you're playing it where it's open play and it's got no meaning, you're not playing that game. So even if it is a fluffy sort of narrative mission that might not be the most balanced, you both tend to turn up with lists using points, and you play within the framework of match play where you only use one stratagem a turn, a phase, all that sort of stuff, because to most people that is still the game they want to play. The minute you start going, we're doing power level, you can bring 18 hive tyrants, it's not the same game. So people still don't do that. I think it's very polarized people's opinions of this whole tournament players and narrative gamers. There is a lot of a crossover to it.
No, I don't.
That's
That's what I'm trying to say. I don't think there are two camps.
No,
I don't think there are two camps at
all.
all.
Tribalism that people slip into, which is just unnecessary.
Maybe
you just get people that.
That's what I'm pushing back on.
I like playing fun games, but I'll go to a tournament as well. But I will probably build slightly different lists. Like on a Friday night, it's a laid-back game, but it's still a match play game. But I'll bring something dumb along that I don't get to use often, and the consequence is that unit will probably die. But I've got to use that toy. But I went in knowing that was the situation.
Yes.
But if it does something great, it's that story of finally my death thread did something.
Yeah, like, listen, like, so my Wasbomb Blaster Jets are my narrative inclusion, but they're not narrative. They're an inefficient choice, yeah? But I love what they do functionally in the game so
cool,
much.
Right?
They do something cool, but also, actually, tactically, I think there's an element to them as well, yeah? But irregardless, it doesn't make me more narrative taking a Wasbomb, yeah? Because if I took only Met Guns, yeah, I'm as narrative as the guy that takes 3 Wasbombs, yeah? Right?
Yes.
You know, the guy that takes 3 Wasbombs is obviously insane and is a great player and should probably be applauded all the time. But like, when I do the teleporty shot and I picture, like, sending a Space Marine captain into space...
It's great when that happens, right?
Yeah, I'm the happiest boy in the world. I'm just like, what an incredibly cool story to be a part of. But it's a tactical choice. I'm sending him into space because I've chosen him as not the correct choice, but in my opinion, the best choice to go and teleport into space on a tactical level, right? So I like that this all came off one sentence from earlier. So let's read what the guys in the chat are saying.
Yeah.
Ixtab, I used to fight with the Dog Brothers quite a bit in Europe. We also something called Black Eagle. That's a very specific Filipino stick fighting set of terms there that I never expected to come up on the on the stream. Anyway, you can't only be narrative Space Marine gamer in that context unless you create your own rules, as in some of the 40k novels. A 5-man kill team can survive and kill massive genocide army, for example. I think ultimately everybody is narrative, no matter how competitive they are. That's my point. Like,
my tournament list's got names.
Yeah, well, I don't want to.
Got names.
Yeah, and Lee, thank you for bringing the point up. Like, and it's not meant to be like dogging on you in any way, shape, or form. I always said narrative players are more likely to buy limited edition books. No, I know. Oh yeah, no, I see Lee's written something now. No, it's a good conversation to have because it's part of an ongoing conversation I've had all week, which kicked off when I talked to Dave from Midday Wargaming, and then I was just like, what do people actually think that I don't want to play the story? Like, That's wild. That's wild. Like, you know, I think of Nick Thompson all the time, playing his squigs, winning best sports, yeah, one pin across the board, yeah, beat people up. Was he a narrative gamer? Yes, but so was the guy that came dead last and second, and the guy that takes Change Host. Change Host is a battalion that represents like a thematic part of the story.
Very thematic, yeah.
Yeah, it sucks, and it's a terrible set of rules. Yeah, but it's a story. Yeah, the thing narrative is a personal to the individual, and berating for someone not engaging in your personal fantasy seems odd. If you want to do props, to you, but don't get upset if I'm not fully on board. I think that's absolutely fair. Colonel Cabbage, maybe narrative is too charged a term to be useful to cover everything we're trying to express. It is. It is. I remember.
I think the other end of it as well. Hang on, I'll let you carry on because you were mid-sentence, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was just going to say, I remember when I first started getting into Warhammer, the people would say, oh, that's cheesy. And I remember like asking someone, I was like, express to me what you mean by cheesy. And then they would be like, bad. And I'd be like, bad how? Give me some context. Like, I know, right? Like, so when we did the Lumineth review yesterday, I had to be like, sometimes we might talk about these units being the better option. And for context, we mean better as potentially more efficient to work inside the battle plans and the meta of the framework of the game right now. That's what better is contextualized as. It's a complicated thing to review stuff.
It's not easy. And it can be subjective to some extent at times, right?
Yeah, and I can be super wrong, right? What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, but cheesy. I was like, what the fuck is cheesy? And I see, but like efficient is much better. Yeah, his army is really efficient.
It's a loaded term. It stems almost from that thing of in the 90s, Warhammer guys used to say that gamer is a beardy gamer, and it was a loaded term that was basically like making villainy on someone that brought a strong list.
Yeah, I don't
think it was the strong list that was actually the problem. It was the player. You still get there's this situation even in like a narrative, like friendly people going to a club. There's these people going, I want to play narrative. They don't have a problem with people bringing a competitive list. They have a problem with people bringing an obnoxious list and playing it in a very aggressive and powerful way that then means that they don't get a game. And I think that's, to me, the difference.
This is really not what I was expecting to talk about today. But, so actually it comes up to...
Screw terrain, Rob. Terrain's boring.
That's what I wanted to talk about. I'm so sorry. But it comes up... Another conversation that occurred last night. This is the thing as well. Like, if you spend all of your days just talking about these things, they're going to be parts of, going to be ongoing stories. I know if you guys have been listening to podcasts, you'd already heard this a few times before, right? But the thing that came up last night on Twitter was, I want to talk terrain. To terrain. I want to talk terrain or to terrain. All right, we'll quickly talk about this. I'd love everyone in the chat. This is where I'm going to get you involved because I don't want to. So last night I talked about how I think the Technado, so that's tech list plus the portal, is going to be a very negative play experience. Yeah? Because the ability for tech lists to cast a spell on a casting value of 12 and then cast another spell through it, which is going to do mortal wounds to most of my army within reasonable range. It's oppressive. Another great word for it is oppressive. But a more nebulous term that we talk about is a negative play experience. Yeah? So an N.P.E. And cheesy, full of neckbeards running it, who are power gamers, who whack, at all time. Like, they're all awful terms to describe something. But let's talk about negative play experience, because it's not on the player. If the rules allow it, let's talk about this. If the rules allow it, I always think you should do it.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I never begrudge the player. I just begrudge that someone's had the audacity to make the game that ugh.
And simple.
My first experience of the Space Marine Codex last year was against Raven Guard that deployed right up in my face. By the end of turn 3, I'd lost all my stuff, even though it was out of line of sight, and I rolled very few dice. That was a shite gaming experience, and it was nothing on the guy I was against. It was the people that wrote the rules, because they enabled him, essentially. Yes. And he was allowed to, because it was within the framework of the tournament, so nothing wrong with that. So I'd never had a begrudging kind of comment about the lovely chap that I played. I even gave him a best sports vote because he was playing it by the game. So it was nothing he was doing wrong. Yeah. Just it sucked to play.
Agitate's like, but at 12, is it even going to get cast? Talking about being able to cast the Technado spell. Pretty confident that there aren't many auto unbinds in the world. and he could always, and also Techless, if he really wants to, the worst version of that negative play experience is I've written a suboptimal list in my army, but it's got an auto unbind inside of it, right? It's got this once per game I'm going to stop you, or I'm running Hos Arcanum, right? Yeah, and I can dispel stuff every first and third and fifth round. It's like cool. So then someone does spell portal, yeah, and they do it outside of 30 inches, so I can't stop it. Right, I know, John, you're not 100% au fait with this, but like they do spell portal,
I've been
right,
paying
with
attention to
with
it, yeah.
+1 to cast because of Techless, and also I use some Aether Quartz, so I'm going to re-roll that cast or add +1 to it, and then Techless just bangs the spell through, and I can't unbind it. I have no options. So even at list writing, I've thought about this, and I've gone, I'd like to do something about it. I'd like to stop this thing I know, yeah? Once. I paid points to do it once, not the 5 turns he can do it one time. Yeah? And even in that situation, my opponent can make it so that I can't do the thing. Yeah? It's incredibly uninteractive. So my question to the Twitch chat is, I would like you to try, if you can, to describe what you think a negative play experience is. Like, to you. Because I recognise that term is probably very subjective. Right? It's super subjective. Like, a negative play experience to me is all eels. But it's narrative. It's within the framework of the rules. Yeah? It doesn't hurt anyone.
Yeah.
Like, it just sucks. It's just boring. Like, they all strike first in over about round 3, which sucks. I just can't be bothered with it. Yeah? I can't be bothered with it. So, my question...
It's almost that weird thing. It's kind of... There's not a definitive answer to me. It's like a negative play experience to me is if it's a game that I'm not going to enjoy so much, but the super negative
but
play
that's
experience
subjective.
is then on the top of it. It's like I can have a really dull and uninteractive game, but the most uninteractive it can be. So to me, if I don't have to roll any dice and I lose stuff, so there's no playthrough or playback for me, that's where I find it's the worst.
No.
So like having someone charge forward and remove, so good examples, Magnus can go up against Custodes and remove their invuln save. If that's my entire army in one big cluster and he just shoots the shit out of me and I have no rolling of dice to stop my stuff from dying, worst experience ever.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, matchups can... You're right, matchups sometimes, or bad matchups can produce a negative play experience. That's the thing.
But if it's,
again,
for everyone, though, if Techless is a problem for every faction...
Yeah, and I'd like to try and remove this from the player.
Yeah.
We're assuming in this situation, every player that we play is always a good laugh. Yeah, who people are is not something we can do anything about, nor we can write rules for. Obviously, as a society, we can, but in the game. So let's see what the guys are saying. Scott B says it's something not only you can't stop, but your opponent needs no skill, and in Techless' case, even luck to pull off. That's not a game. That's not a game at that point. You're both just watching. Scott B, I agree with that absolutely. I feel the more definitively something is going to happen, that the worse the play experience is. Yeah, the dice are the drama,
reward, right?
Yeah, dice are the drama. Like they're like the element. Like the movement stat has always been really important because it's a definitive thing that you can control. It's quantitative, right? I can move 12 inches. So the decision points are often at the movement phase because they're where I decide to do the thing. Whereas if I take Archeon and I move him this way to go fight the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist, who is not on the objective and not the 10 ghouls, like, it's cool and I want to go beat up the Ghoul King on Terrorgeist, but it's a wrong decision, yeah? But if I send him to the 10 ghouls and the dice fail me and I don't kill him, right, then that's the dice. I made the right decision, great work, but the dice haven't let me. Whereas if I can just decide the 10 ghouls are going to die,
yeah. I think that's the challenge. There should always be a risk and a reward, and the less, ironically, if you're wanting to make a very solid list, you want to remove as much of the chance as possible. So by that kind of inherent nature, you're going to want to have these things that you can just do and know will happen.
Yeah.
If your end game is that you want to win a tournament, if you're not taking those options, you're actually doing yourself a disservice, right?
Yeah.
Especially if they've been put on the plate for you to use. It's not like you're breaking a rule, you're actually just using the book.
Okay, so I'm going to read what everyone thinks a negative play experience is in the chat, as opposed to...
Can be good, yeah.
So Big Ruru says, I think the issue of Games Workshop is they normally have optimal and suboptimal choices, while other smaller, newer games have optimal choices. The other part is density. This game has so much to try to balance and manage and release. I feel they're trying to hit an ever-moving target to meet and demand while also maintaining a style we expect. So Big Ruru is there in that point giving some props to Games Workshop and the difficulty of producing what we see here. I don't, Big Ruru, like, on reading the rules for tech lists, on reading the rules for Croak, you know, I read about Comet's Call, which is a board-wide mortal wound spell to kill characters. Yeah, I don't need. As a gamer, I recognize that as a negative play experience. To me, I think that's going to be a negative for me, and it's going to be like my characters. So I'm going to have to go get Croak. Yeah, no, I'm forced to engage. Like, but it's the same thing catapults do, but catapults have to roll dice. So I don't think it's particularly fair to say that Games Workshop just has a really tough job, because I think they do have a tough job, but some of these things, the Vortex for Skaven is a very obviously negative play experience that is incredibly poor game design. And it only required playing on the tabletop like one time for everyone to be like, nah, this sucks. So who in their playtest team or in their rules team were like, this doesn't suck, this is fine? The real question is, and I've been thinking about this a lot, John, and this is out there, so I'm sorry for suggesting it. Are we not 100% certain someone in the playtest team or someone in the rules writing team isn't like really like into BDSM, like a bit of a sadomasochist? Like, I know you weren't expecting that's where we were going, but like maybe they're just like, they run their unit in and someone puts the Skaven Vortex on it and they're like, mortal wounds, and they're like, oh yeah. Oh, they're like pinching themselves as it happens because they fucking love it. Do you know what I mean? Now it's you're not sure? Have I taken the serious conversation too far?
I think it's more that they might just think that things might need to be a bit wonky at times, and they like having intentionally broken things, because otherwise the other option is that they're doing it because they're that negligent. And I just. I'm not sure that's the right.
No, that's not what I think is going on, John. Yeah. John, I think someone's putting tech lists down the portal, yeah, and then they're doing it in Games Workshop HQ in that like rules writing team, and then there's a guy like nipple clamps, face mask, yeah, and he's like, "Daddy, harder, yeah, harder, Daddy, roll a 6," and it's just weird at this stage.
But he is a god, to be fair. Maybe that's the problem. They go, is he godlike enough? And then they just keep escalating, and they're like, yeah, that's oppressive enough. God should be oppressive.
Anyway, obviously I jest. I've only heard rumours that's true. Right,
so the Nathan Prescott list.
Spank me harder, Daddy. Spank me harder.
Oh God.
Right, let me see what the guys in the chat are saying. But Big Ruru, thanks for chipping in there. Towing in, I just talked to our local Necron player talking about Tower OP. Everything is broken, etc. A follow-up question was, how was your game last night? He played against 85 warriors and a full crisis bomb in table me turn 2. He played this wonky skew list, which led to his feel bads moment. There we go. That's the other problem about a negative play experience. People who don't understand that the list that they're playing is really skew, or it's really negative, or like that their list is really skew, is without that knowledge. We talked about that before, though.
Yeah.
As soon as you take the dice out of the game, are we even playing Warhammer anymore? I think is a great point. Andrew Tate says, I think if you know something it's going to happen and you can't stop it, that's pretty negative. Yeah, I think a lot of times about the one of my favourite rules ever in Age of Sigmar was Wrathmongers. And if you don't know what Wrathmongers used to do, is if you killed one, then what you're able to do is pick a unit within a model. Within 3 inches, maybe it might be 2 of the slain Wrathmonger. So if you had a unit of 5, you could do it 5 times, but you could never do it to the same unit twice. And you could take over their body because their hate-filled blood would fill them, and then you could use them to attack either someone else or themselves. Yeah. So if Archeon was running around, which obviously doesn't make tons of sense, we'll pick someone else. We'll pick Alariel. Yeah. Alariel's running around, and then goes and attacks a unit of Wrathmongers, which is a mistake, then you could one time use Alariel to attack herself, or attack a Tree Lord Ancient nearby, or whatever you would want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's super
cool
narrative.
Right?
It's a cool story. Yeah. You couldn't stop it happening, right? Other than don't charge the fucking Wrathmongers. Like, it was like...
You had a choice, though, there. You had the choice.
Yeah, you had a choice. You had a choice, but the ability you couldn't stop, right? Yeah. But you had a choice to engage. And I thought that was good. Breachbrush says, just shooting drones for 3 turns with my Marines before I could interact with anything. The game devolved in static standoff, both just rolling buckets of dice. I also think rolling loads of dice is a negative play experience. I'm for rolling dice, just not 800 dice.
Efficiently.
Yeah.
This whole re-rolling all faileds, just no.
So everyone seems to really happy. Slash approves. It seems like Games Workshop are releasing end game content, which is OP to give more options, but is unbalanced in the competitive scene. That's interesting. So end game, obviously, with the idea that Age of Sigmar 3 is coming up, that might be some of the reasons that you see that. A bit like the way Marines were just dominant in 40k, John, at the end of 8th edition. They basically broke the game, and they were like, "Don't worry, we fixed the game. Here's a new edition," which is again really poor salesmanship. I don't think that's the case because they would have to know how to do it. And then Mima says, we're playtesting. If the playtest see the final version of the rules, if they comment test on beta, then it gets adjusted afterwards, and no final test is done. Hence, weird rules interactions and obviously very strong units. Yep. Anyway, well, that's an interesting conversation. And if you are listening to the podcast or watching it back, I'd love to know what your version of a negative play experience is. I think not being able to roll dice and things that happen automatically are good examples of that. So, I mean, yeah. Prayers. We've talked about prayers quite a few times, John.
Yes, because that was quite a strange interaction to have, because they're not spells, so there's not an obvious counterplay to them.
Yeah, Colonel Cabbage, as always, has delightfully just encapsulated this into some quick bullet points. Bad play experiences equal non-interactive, plus power level, plus time-consuming are...
Yes.
Keep it. We've not talked about terrain at all, John. Maybe tomorrow.
Oh.
Maybe tomorrow.
Have you not got something scheduled for tomorrow yet? I am free if you'd like it.
No, I think I have. I don't remember. But I know next week that I have both the 40k show and I have Mr. Vince Ventrella tomorrow. Not tomorrow. Next week we'll be doing a show, which is exciting. I think he's getting up early to do the stream street, which I like. So maybe we can touch on some of this again. This is really not what I was expecting to talk about. What I want to talk about, John, I'm going to try and have that conversation really quickly now. What I was going to talk about, and if anyone's listening to the podcast or watching back live,
I think the stream died. Oh, it's back now.
I know.
Just literally... It died briefly for me. That's weird.
So, what I would like to talk about is the terrain and how have you ever built a board of terrain?
I'm partway through doing one, actually.
Okay, which one are you partway through?
So I've bought a load of the Age of Sigmar like platform stuff. Like the big flat hill things, and then I'm going to combine that with my Warcry stuff I've got. And then I've got the Nocturne's Crown, the Chaos Stargate thing, and my plan was that it's basically a board that will work for both game systems.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's really interesting. My question is because I'm designing some boards soon. Yeah.
Yes.
And I have already some ideas on how I would like the boards to look and what I would do with the boards, but it's daunting. Right, it's like I like that bit of terrain, I like that bit of terrain, but I'm thinking of drawing a map, and then start to write out because specifically, so making a bunch of terrain is easy, not easy, sorry, but making a bunch of terrain I could do, or I could buy a bunch of terrain and I could paint it. But what I want to do is design like a setting. So that's because that
has a practical purpose, right? As well,
that has a practical purpose, that has some sort of footing or footprint, which is also practical for gaming terms, and that's when that adds that layer of complexity on, which I'm like, oh, actually, that's a bit wild. So I'm looking forward to doing that challenge. But I also wondered, what is the best process for because you're also if you build the stuff from scratch, I can design the boards to be how I like, and then build the stuff, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
But if I go the other way around and I think, actually, that's the terrain I'd like to buy and put on the tabletop, but now I need to redesign how I'd like the table to play. And it's
sometimes it doesn't translate, right? So especially the difference between 40k and Age of Sigmar terrain in the fact that you buy a 40k ruin, and currently as it stands, if you build it in a stupid way, potentially, it's not necessarily as game efficient because you've made it full of holes so people can shoot through it, type of thing. Whilst in Age of Sigmar, perhaps there's that, it's an area piece of terrain. and line of sight not being such a concern, perhaps as well.
Yeah, but I don't think we've got time to talk about it now.
Yeah.
So
Something to touch on next time.
yes, we'll touch on everyone. We'll not touch on everyone next time. So sorry, but we'll touch on it next time.
Because you fucking love little guys.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll never forget.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're back now, but we are heading out. So I apologise. We're heading out. Heading out. It's been a pleasure, John, talking to you. Thank you very much.
It's been good. It got me thinking, which is dangerous, right? It's my day off, Rob. You're not meant to challenge me and make me have to think.
Well, it's just a continual point. Like I want to be. I'm a narrative gamer, and that's it.
Yes.
So WS Soren, happy birthday to the Lumineth. Happy birthday to you guys. K-Dread, see you later. Thank you everyone for joining us live. Thank you to everyone on the honest-wargamer Patreon. Couldn't do it without you. And thank you to all of you podcast bros. Thank you for making us the 134th best podcast in all.
One thing before we go.
What?
James has put up a load of merchandise on the store.
Oh yes, we probably should have a. We should probably have a link that happens in the chat at some point. But
yeah,
yeah,
we're so good at this, Rob.
So we have got some new merch. If you guys are interested, and let me tell you, the actual quality on the t-shirt is pretty rad. If you want, buy it. Don't buy it. Your choice. Not bothered.
I'm wearing one right now. That's all I'm saying.
Whatever. No, just whatever you want. Like, just do it. But like, make your own hoodies and t-shirts. I'm just saying that they're probably the coolest t-shirts that you could buy on our website, at least.
Until we get a new design, right? And then that'll be the biggest ever because it'll be a triple XL.
Yeah. Anyway, everyone have a great day, and thank you again. Talk to you soon.